became a career firefighter with the Howard County Department of Fire and Rescue Service, the chief of the medical division, or EMS, the unofficial historian of the Howard County Department of Fire and Rescue Service. Over 65,000 digital images and newspaper articles, magazine articles, etc. Episode 24-31, big Howard County fires that occurred in the county over the years, and that's big Howard County fires that had occurred. As I had researched it, it appears that 4 of the largest fires that occurred within Howard County, 3 of the 4 were actually colleges that were in Howard County, and all 4 of the biggest fires that occurred were in the Ellicott City District. I will eventually be talking about each and every one of them in its own individual podcast. But the fires that did occur over the years, St. Charles College, which was across from Doe Reagan Manor, just west of Ellicott City. That fire occurred on March 17th, 1911. Then there was the Rock Hill College fire in downtown Ellicott City that occurred on January 16th, 1923. Then there was the St. Mary's College fire, actually on 2 different occasions. One was on June 14th, 1968. That was the Lower College fire, and then 1998 was the demise of the college itself. And then the last image, or last large fire, was the Daniels fire, Daniels Mill fire, which occurred on September 17th, 1977. And that will be the focus of today's podcast. I'll get to the others in subsequent podcasts, but today we will concentrate on the Daniels fire of September 17th, 1977. Daniels is located in northeast Howard County along the Patapsco River, several miles as the crow flies from the intersection of I-70 and Route 29 off of Old Frederick Road, off of Daniels Road. And it's depicted by the nicely drawn arrow that you can see on the image. The fire that occurred came in late at night, went to 2 alarms. I know that the closest fire station, the Bethany Station, they responded, and actually Sergeant Richard Fries was on that piece of apparatus. He was the first one in, and he may choose to comment about his take on the fire. His take was a little humorous, and we'll see if, as this is eventually posted, if he wants to make some comments about it. But Fire Engine 81 out of Station 8 was the first to arrive on the scene. I was on the second engine company to arrive on the scene out of Ellicott City. The unique thing was that as you're pulling up to the scene, you're still about a half mile or more away from the scene. The fire was so intense, and the amount of light that was given, half mile away, you could sit and read a newspaper, you could play football, baseball. It was kind of neat to see that amount of fire and the amount of light and heat that was giving off. Just showing you some of the structures. This is one of the major buildings on campus there, so to speak. This could very well be of the previous slide where you saw the building of fire and the bottom row of windows that were being highlighted with the fire behind them. This may very well be that building that matches the image that we saw earlier. The fire destroyed about 80% of the buildings. The biggest challenge for us that particular evening there were several challenges. One building fire had a huge head start, and essentially no amount of water was going to be able to be applied to the fire that would really make much difference. We gave it the college try, but no pun intended, but we gave it the college try, but it said no amount of master streams was really going to make a difference. The second thing that doomed this structure was the railroad tracks were just in front of the mill. You'll see that in a few minutes. So that limited our ability to get close to the site, and also added a degree of danger from the railroad and trains that might be passing through, although we finally did get the train stopped. And the third thing that really inhibited any sort of aggressive and or meaningful fire attack was that access to this building was not 360 degrees. Basically, the only access you had was the front of the building. As you can see, there's the railroad tracks. Between the railroad tracks and the building was a road that we could use, but that was actually almost too dangerous to use because, it was right up against the building, and should there have been a structural failure, that might have been bad news for whoever was near it. Also, right behind the building that we can see, the mill, is the Patapsco River, and there was no road that circled the building. So access to much of the mill itself was not available. basically is the front of the building, which then also had its problems because of its proximity to the railroad tracks. So the building itself, by the time we got there that evening, die was cast, so to speak. Just the mill itself, sort of the iconic logo, C.R. Daniels Mill Incorporated, which had been there for about a century, I believe it was stated. We actually got from the mill the coats that were used by Yogi and JR. Their fire department coats were manufactured there. Actually, Dave Tumlin's mother worked there, and they created the 2 coats for the 2 dogs. This is an interesting picture showing one of the bridges that the B&O Railroad used to go past and through Daniels. According to this was the 3rd bridge at this location. 2 bridges were used by the railroad. This is the 3rd. Of unique notice is that this was a Bowman Bridge with its unique construction, unique at the time. Its sister or brother, Bowman Bridge, is actually down at the Savage, at the Savage Mill. And it could very well be, that bridge could very well be the last example of a Bowman Bridge construction, which, as you can see, was rather unique. Eventually, this bridge was replaced by the current bridge that is there. It will be just to the left of the picture, and went from Howard County, Baltimore County, back into Howard County. This is just showing the year that it was built, in 1870 that it was built. And as I said, its brother or sister is still in existence in Savage, Maryland. These next series of pictures, most of them will just be showing you the community of Daniels. It was very typical of a mill town back in the day, the turn of the century and early 1900s. Mill town meaning it was all self-sufficient. There was the industry, housing, they had grocery stores, they had churches, they had its own post office, etc. So it was just a self-sufficient community nestled in the valley of Howard County's Patapsco River. Again, just an image showing the mill sort of towards the top of the picture, top and center of the picture. And you can also see on the left-hand side some of the buildings that were used to house the employees. This particular bridge is coming from Howard County after it went past the mill, crossed the river, and then down the Baltimore County side. I think this is a river road, I believe that's what it was called. When coming across the bridge, instead of coming towards the picture, if you came across a bridge and went to the left, that would take you around to the other side of the mill, the opposite side of the Patapsco River, where there were additional housing units that were available for the employees. Just an image showing the mill itself. As we're looking at this, several things sort of stand out. You can see the relocated bridge, a railroad bridge that's coming down from out the west and then heading towards Baltimore. You can see the mill itself. You can see the Patapsco River as it wound around behind the mill itself. And also of interest is just adjacent to the Patapsco River, you can see the mill race. That's where water was diverted and it flowed into the mill itself, which powered the equipment that was needed to manufacture the products that was used. Also, you can see the top right, you can see some of the housing units that were made available. Also, when you look at the railroad bridge, if you look just above the bridge, about 50, maybe 100 feet, what you'll see there is the swinging bridge. This is a pedestrian bridge that allowed individuals to cross from the Baltimore County side, where the housing units were, across the bridge and then to work. This is just an old picture, is about all I can say. It's just an old picture. I'm not sure what the highlights were, the blue and the red highlight, but of interest, you can see the railroad tracks, which at that time were 2 parallel tracks. The bridge coming from the mill into Baltimore County and some of the housing units there on the lower right. Again, we're looking at the mill housing. The actual mill itself was going to be just to the left, just upstream to the left. But these are some of the housing units that were used by employees. That's, I believe it was River Road. What was unique, because I went down that road many times before it was closed because of Agnes. But you had the housing units on that side, and then you had open land on the right-hand side. And much of the time, that land was kept nice and clean and cut, and residents could play football, baseball, whatever, picnic, whatever they wanted to do. But I can remember those houses. Another thing is that you can see at least 2 churches here, and Daniels was large enough that there are at least 4 churches available to community members. But we can see 2 churches here. The church on the upper left-hand side looks like there may be images of a cemetery that were being used at that time. Again, just an image of the mill town itself, homes for the employees closest to us, and then the mill itself, which would actually have been across the tracks and before the Patapsco River. Again, just a picture of part of the community. Looks like some housing. I'm not sure whether some of these buildings on the right-hand side were part of the stores, etc., that were made available to the employees. You can see at the very bottom of the picture the tracks and, again, some of the structures that made up the Daniels Mill complex. The mill itself, again, the railroad tracks, which by the time this picture was taken was just a single track. Modern technology did away with dual tracks. If you're coming into the Daniels Mill, you'd come off Route 99, Rogers Avenue, down Old Frederick Road to Daniels Mill Road, wind your way down to the bottom of the hill to the Patapsco River. You go past the Patapsco Mill Dam. You would go underneath the railroad tracks and then make an immediate sharp 90-degree right-hand turn, and the road would travel between the tracks and the mill itself. The road itself would have been between the cars that you can see parked up against the building and some of the cars that are parked very close to the tracks. The actual road went in between that set of cars. Again, just a kind of unique picture, just looking at the mill complex itself. In the foreground, housing for the employees, the railroad tracks, and the mill itself that can be seen. And then on the other side of the river, you can see housing units that were available for employees of the mill. I'm taking a moment just to study these pictures, and it appears that the tracks are in the position of when the Bowman Bridge was in existence. And it appears that in front of the mill at this particular time is almost like a classic village square with trees, etc., etc., in front of the mill and before the tracks. I am pretty sure that when the existing bridge was built, the tracks were relocated. The tracks came much closer to the mill itself. And that structure that you see in center left, I think that was taken down to make room for the new rail system that came through. But, there was a time that the mill itself was just a self-contained community. Again, this is just looking at the mill, an old picture of the mill. The Bowman Bridge is on the right-hand side. You can see the Patapsco River below. You can see the mill race that is going underneath the railroad bridge and then around and into the mill. The black line is significant in that black line is showing where the existing railroad bridge was eventually constructed. That's where the current bridge was finally laid out and built. And the 2 buildings at the tip of that black line and on the right, those were taken down to make room for the new bridge and new road. This is an image of the Patapsco River encompassing the Daniels Mill, 360 degrees, and as you can see, it just basically inundated every building and destroyed every building as far as being waterlogged, destroying equipment, etc. Again, just looking at the mill, you can clearly see the Patapsco River encompassing, circling the mill. You can see the mill race from the lower left circling around and going into the mill itself. You can see the housing units between the bottom of the picture and the tracks. You can actually make out the railroad bridge crossing the Patapsco River to the left, and you can actually see, if you put your glasses on, you can see the footbridge that crossed the Patapsco River and the mill race to get employees from the Baltimore County side into the Howard County side. Access to the houses that were on the Baltimore County side, that you can see some of them, were that you would cross the bridge on the right hand side and then make a left and follow the road back around to where the roads and the villages and the houses were. I used that road several times for brush fire back up the river. This is just a cave that way back in the day that the local Native Americans used to have shelter when they went on hunting parties for food, not hunting parties to attack the local residents, whoever they may have been, but a cave that they used for shelter on their hunting parties. And this is within a half mile of the Daniels Mill. Again, just looking at the an older picture of the Daniels Mill, the bridge coming from the mill, crossing the Patapsco River into Baltimore County. The road coming towards us eventually went down towards Ellicott City, towards Hollowfield. Coming across the bridge, if you made a left, came across the bridge and made a left, that would have taken you way around to the, again, Baltimore County side, to the housing units that were across the river near the mill itself. And you can see some of the housing units on the left-hand side. This is an image following the Patapsco flood, the Agnes flood of 1972. You can see at the bottom a bridge was taken out. Much of the tracks were also destroyed and needed to be rebuilt. If you look sort of towards the upper left-hand corner, you can see where the train tracks went across the Patapsco, and you can also see where there was a significant log jam up against the railroad tracks, which I am sure contribute to flooding of the mill itself. It certainly didn't help. As I stated before, when the fire occurred, there were several things that occurred that minimized effective firefighting. One was that the building itself had a huge start, and we could put master streams on it, the building, and really wouldn't have made any difference. So it was limited as to our water supply. The only place that we could gain water was the Patapsco River just above the railroad bridge. There were a couple spots where we could draft water for the fire operations. Also, you can see here that there was not 360 access. In other words, there was no road that went around the back of the mill. So when firefighting operations occurred, it was basically from the front of the building, and there was no regional access to go all the way around the building. So again, that just impacted the air firefighting operations, the fact that a great head start, limited access to the front of the building. Again, be a couple of newspaper articles just talking about the hopes of what the mill will turn into. Years before the mill fire, and just after the Hurricane Agnes, Daniels Mill was declared a National Historic Site. And for a period of time after the flood, they did post a security guard to minimize trespassers, etc. As I'm looking at this article, it is making for an interesting read, talking about the stores, the post office, the general store that were in existence and that were damaged and swept away by the fire. I mean, I want to take a moment to look at this article and others. Again, just a picture of the Daniels Mill as it sits a year after the flood, and the damaged buildings that were still there but not usable. Again, just another article talking about the devastation, talking about the hundreds of yards of string used in the mill dangled from a pole as a result of Hurricane Agnes. Now, as you're looking at that, those strings, were up 20, 30 feet, so a fair amount of water inundated the Daniels Mill. Again, just more hopes and dreams that of the mill itself, now being referred to as a ghostly mill town. Article just indicating that the flames did what the flood could not do. And again, just looking at that, you may want to stop the image and increase the font size to read the article itself. Again, just a day after, just a headline: fire hits Daniels Mill, destroying over 15 buildings. And again, just a few more newspaper articles. Come back as planned at the old mill site, which really never developed. So this is an image, which is interesting, of the swing bridge that allowed employees on the Baltimore County side, that's what we're looking at, of the downtown Daniels, to come over a swinging bridge to the mill itself. And just looking at this particular image and what was written, it says, "Swinging bridge in Daniels, Maryland. My mother, Ora A. Brown, was on it when it went down into the Patapsco River." I'm sure that if that was a Disney World, that would have been a heck of a ride, but I don't think it was one that Disney World wanted to replicate. There may be a couple people who view this image, that view this podcast, that may be able to add a little bit to what happened to the bridge, why it went down, and any other information related to the bridge itself. Again, following the Patapsco Hurricane Agnes flood, the paper, I believe it was the Howard County Times, was looking to purchase pictures of the flood activity, and were willing to pay for the rights of those pictures. As we're looking at this particular picture, again, this is showing the mill, the top portion of the image, the railroad bridge coming across the Patapsco. The swing bridge is long gone. But a special note also, if you look at the railroad bridge, you can see a log jam where debris coming from upstream, that's to the right, coming down and got tangled up with the bridge and created a log jam, which I guess indirectly also enhanced flooding of the mill itself, diverting water not down the Patapsco, but inland and into the mill itself. Please use your remaining heartbeats wisely and not waste a single precious one.